struggled with postpartum depression after my daughter was born. It was a really rough time period for me. I went from being like the Pinterest mom, totally loving it all with my first, and then after my daughter was born, my whole world basically just came crashing down because postpartum depression was really horrible. I would not wish it on anybody. It catapulted me into questioning my whole life, my career, my identity, all of it. And it eventually led me to a really deep spiritual awakening, like a dark night of the soul, as they say. But definitely started from a very dark place that I had no idea. I had battled mental health, like health and depression all of my 20s. I was definitely aware with that, but I did not anticipate it at all with motherhood.
When did you know that you were going through postpartum depression? What were some of the signs?
hmm So it was my daughter was about 4 months old, and I would say it was when I started really just going into, like, very dark thoughts and thinking, like, "What have I done?" Bringing another child into this world and kind of wanting to, like, take it back, but obviously you can't take it back.
No.
And then
Mhm.
and then it's just, like, the guilt that eats at you for even thinking that way, right? And thinking those thoughts, and then just being really angry all the time. The rage was really shocking. I was not expecting it. People talk about like postpartum blues and the hormones and feeling, yeah, sad and just kind of not feeling yourself. So that I was kind of expecting, but I was not expecting the rage whatsoever. It was like I could go from 0 to 100, just like raging fire breathing dragon. So when those things kind of came, I was like, oh yeah, this is different than just that. Yeah, like who am I? Depression, like not having the will to do things. I was like, no, this is really different. So yeah, she was about 4 months old, and it was definitely the rage that kind of clued me into having postpartum depression.
Hi, it's Tiffany, Lorraine Galloway, certified high performance coach, with another episode of the Resilient Mother podcast. Today, I have with me Annie. We're going to be talking about resilient strength, and she's going to talk about her journey to spiritual healing from postpartum depression, a subject that is really important. And I don't know if enough people know about it unless it's happened to you. So, Annie, please tell us a little more about you and let's dive in.
Yeah. Hi, Tiffany. Thanks so much for having me. Hi, everybody. My name is Annie Bertrand. So I'm a mom of two. I struggled with postpartum depression after my daughter was born. It was a really rough time period for me. I went from being like the Pinterest mom, totally loving it all with my first, and then after my daughter was born, my whole world basically just came crashing down because postpartum depression was really horrible. I would not wish it on anybody. It catapulted me into questioning my whole life, my career, my identity, all of it. And it eventually led me to a really deep spiritual awakening, like a dark night of the soul, as they say. But definitely started from a very dark place that I had no idea. I had battled mental health, like health and depression all of my 20s. I was definitely aware with that, but I did not anticipate it at all with motherhood.
When did you know that you were going through postpartum depression? What were some of the signs?
hmm So it was my daughter was about 4 months old, and I would say it was when I started really just going into like very dark thoughts and thinking like, what have I done? Bringing another child into this world and kind of wanting to like take it back, but obviously you can't take it back.
No.
And then
Mhm.
and then it's just like the guilt that eats at you for even thinking that way, right? And thinking those thoughts, and then just being really angry all the time. The rage was really shocking. I was not expecting it. People talk about like postpartum blues and the hormones and feeling, yeah, sad and just kind of not feeling yourself. So that I was kind of expecting, but I was not expecting the rage whatsoever. It was like I could go from 0 to 100, just like raging fire breathing dragon. So when those things kind of came, I was like, oh yeah, this is different than just that. Yeah, like who am I? Depression, like not having the will to do things. I was like, no, this is really different. So yeah, she was about 4 months old, and it was definitely the rage that kind of clued me into having postpartum depression.
Do you think now, looking back in hindsight, was there anything you could possibly have done to prevent it? Or what is your knowledge now around who it affects and who it doesn't affect and why?
hmm hmm Yeah, so I think having better systems in place in the sense of like family support and things like that. And my family was always very supportive, but I wasn't always someone who asked for help, something that I struggle with. So, having things like house cleaning in place, like if you can, and meal prep and things like that, that take off some of that load. My husband worked night shifts, so that was really hard. And so if you can have a night nurse or kind of postpartum doula and things like that, that definitely would help. I think also it's really just kind of, for me anyways, the postpartum depression really kind of amplified things in my life that I was kind of already aware of, that they weren't really in alignment, and then I was maybe not really dealing with, or kind of pushing under the rug, which is why it really
Caught
catapulted
up
me.
with you. Yeah.
It caught up with me. Yeah, exactly. And it really brought to light my spiritual awakening, because it was just oh man, okay, I have to deal with these things, So if you're already in a place where you're already stressed, you already have maybe anxiety, you have financial hardships, you have relationship hardships, all of these things that are very common in just, the modern life. I think that those things definitely make moms more at risk to have postpartum depression if you kind of already have some of those stresses beforehand.
And I don't understand this mentality that we think mom has a baby and then we focus on the baby and we forget to focus on mom, or we think, oh, she's fine on her own. Her instincts will kick in. She'll just figure it out. I personally have never had my mom come help me out after a baby's born, and my exes weren't that there or not very smart about taking care of me after baby was there, because they had their own stuff that came up for them in some cases. And so I now, at least I had a postpartum doula with my son, but that was just because nobody was available during COVID. You had to pay people to come help you out. And then they could only come for so long because there was such a high demand for what little help you could get during those times and who was willing to take the risk or come in with a mask on or whatnot. But it was something that that we do so much to prepare women for labor. We do so much to educate them on that. And even some of those classes I didn't get, I just got thrown into it all. And now understand, oh, I had options. I didn't know what those options were. But after, I think we think it's just gonna click. And you can read all the books you want to, but every child's different is the problem too. So you can have a plan in place, and you can have a plan for your pregnancy too, and then something's gonna throw it off. And I think that's the most shocking thing. But today, couples are extremely dependent on each other because we don't all live near extended family. We all don't have family that we're attached to, or we have toxic family we can't turn to, or they come say, oh, the baby's cute, and they leave and they think you're fine, or you're good. Or, I even had one postpartum midwife who didn't come back for the 6th week when she was supposed to. She came to the 12th, but she didn't even come back for the 6th week to check on me to see how I was doing. Or I had someone from church come over and see my kitchen, all of the dishes piled up on the shelf. And I'm not supposed to be out of bed, but nobody was bringing me an ice pack for what I needed at the time postpartum. So she caught me out of bed when I hadn't been out of bed for days, because she saw me up and she hadn't been in my home before. She just assumed it was always that way and didn't just thought this is how we live. Not, oh, does she need some help? Could I do some, no, just, I want to see the cute baby touch the little toes and okay, bye. Here's a meal, or here's this. And it's isn't there obviously help that's needed right there? But then did I think to ask for it either? No, because I'm supposed to be fine. I'm supposed to be okay. It's okay. I don't have help. And it's not right, because moms were not meant to do it alone. It wasn't designed that way. A child raises a village. And so if you have a sister, if you have a mother, if you have someone who's willing to help you out, that's wonderful. If you don't, postpartum doulas are awesome. And I don't think people know enough about them, because you can have one that helps you get into the nightly routine. You can have one that just helps you through those 12 weeks of the healing process, or the 8, right after when you need help. And it also alleviates some of the stress off of your partner, so that doesn't affect your relationship as much either. It helps you find your new rhythm with each other and with your child, because it's jarring and very different in a relationship, especially if you've been together long enough to have a rhythm without a child. And I had kids right away, so that was not even an option. But and I think there's different degrees of postpartum depression too, and it comes in different forms. Have you come across that now in the work that you do? And can you explain some of the varying degrees? Because my understanding is there's slight signs of it, it's still important, but there's also severe points where you need to go get professional help with it. Can you kind of give that range and some ideas of what
Mhm.
someone's facing?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. So I think there's kind of the milder postpartum blues, and just feeling very overwhelmed and not, like yourself and all. And then typically you have support and that will ease up. And then it ranges from there. And so it can go all the way up to where people literally have postpartum psychosis, where they can be in danger of hurting themselves or their children because it's that the hormones are completely out of whack. And you're just, I think, so overwhelmed and so much in despair, and you just want it to stop. I realized before, I forgot to mention, my daughter had acid reflux when she was a baby, and so she would cry and scream from basically 7 p.m. till 10 p.m. every single day.
Uh-huh.
And it's like so intense, and your nervous system is just like the whole time
Yeah.
to stop. And so those types of things, and you have those external things, and you just want this, like, the screaming to just stop. There's been times where I'd catch myself and I had to tell, like, my husband, I was like, you have to tap in because I just want to, like, throw this baby. And then you just, like, you feel so horrible for even having those thoughts, right? So I think that's where it ranges to when you start having thoughts of harming yourself or harming your child. And then that's when it's really important to get help, like therapy, for example, or more like energy healing really helped me, and holistic kind of support, or being on medication, whatever it is. But and then if it's where you're feeling like really not in control of yourself, and it can go into that borderline like psychosis or actual psychosis, then that's when it's really important to actually go and have yourself admitted so that you can be away from your family, to not hurt anyone. So, and it's
And it
really
can
hard, and there's so much stigma to admitting that, right? And to saying those things out loud, right? Saying that they wanted to just, like, throw my baby so that she would stop crying. Like, that was so hard to verbalize that to my therapist. And you think, like, my goodness, I'm going to say this, and then it's going to trigger this whole set of professionals and people coming over, and is this safe, and the CPS and all the things, right? So
right.
there's so much stigma, and I think that's why a lot of women suffer in silence, because they don't want to trigger all of that. I had one of my really great friends, that's exactly what happened. She opened up, and it triggered a whole, like, CPS investigation, and that just adds to the whole, like, situation, because it's not that the environment is unfit for my child, it's just that I really need help, and my hormones are completely out of whack, and I need the support. It's not the, like, are you, like, you don't want the added stress of, is my baby going to get taken away because I'm speaking up and saying that I need this support.
Well, and unfortunately, that's what feeds the system,
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
that they need numbers. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
be careful about how you approach that. And that's why it's better if you can have family or someone who knows you to just know you're off,
Mm-hmm.
to be the one to help first. But speaking of help, what would have been helpful? What do you wish someone would have done to help you in your situation, or for some of those that you work with? Because I think people get scared when people have mental health issues, and
Mm-hmm.
they kind of tap out themselves because they don't want to get involved, because they don't want it. It's like they think it's contagious sometimes, some of it, but some of it is they just don't know how to handle it. If they haven't had that kind of stress, or they haven't dealt with that with a family member, it's just very foreign to them. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what are the questions they should be asking? What would actually be helpful in those situations?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So yeah, definitely asking for help with household chores and with taking off the mental load. Like, I think so many moms are the ones who are like, do we have enough diapers? Do we have the right creams, like the
Mhm.
formula, and all those things that all the mental load ends up being on us. So I think that's a really big one, asking for help, yeah, from your partner or from a family member to alleviate some of that mental load, and definitely getting mental health support, like therapy, to, yeah, be able to have a safe space to work through a lot of those things. And I think a lot of, when you have, like, say, childhood trauma, for example, or you have emotional wounding and things like that you haven't addressed prior to becoming a parent, I think those are the things that can even make you more susceptible. So if you have someone that you're working through that, that's also really helpful. My weekly Friday therapy sessions were a lifeline at a certain point, because it was always, like, somewhere that I knew that I could go and kind of alleviate some of that load, right? We also hired his spouse's his teen his yeah, his teenage cousin, and she would come babysit for a couple of hours, like, twice a week. So then that was really helpful as well. once we had gotten into like, the groove of things and I could leave for a little bit, and just having some time where I could like be off and be by myself and like breathe for a minute. So yeah, definitely getting those things in place. And if you're someone who already struggles with mental health issues prior, then it's probably really helpful to, kind of preemptively set yourself up for success in that way, with household support and with childcare support and with mental health support, to maybe start therapy beforehand. Or if you're not in like that negative state, then maybe you're working with like a life coach or a spiritual coach of some sort that beforehand, right, to help and already have it in place. Because that's what's hard as well, is to open yourself up, and when you're in such a vulnerable time, to let in and build another relationship like with someone, with a mental health professional, or that type of support system. So if you have that already in place beforehand and during pregnancy, then that can really be helpful as well.
Absolutely. And the doulas that I connected with, I had 3 of them. 2 we got along with, 1 was weird. I'll just put it that way. It made such difference. I'm friends with both of them now. They've watched one of them is adopted. My son is their practice grandchild, as they call him. So it's been great because it's become a lifelong bond and a sisterhood that's really, really special to have that in place. But I think what you're talking about too is just prepare as much as you can. You're going to be sleep deprived. You're going to have 24/7, boom, somebody's dependent on you. And it's a huge shift. And like you said, yours didn't hit till your second child. Like postpartum depression does not have even a time frame. Some people, it doesn't hit till months later, years later, or when you stop nursing. I've heard all sorts of variations of when it could hit. But a lot of it is around something with the hormones, something with lack of sleep, or something that triggers something. And we've talked about that in this podcast too. And I thought it was interesting when someone brought up, because I hadn't thought about it before, that your kids are going to trigger in you stuff from your childhood, your unresolved stuff. And that's why sometimes we have a reaction and we're like, where did that come from? I shouldn't be having that reaction towards my child this way. And if we've had any kind of trauma, it's important to be aware of that. I was blessed to be aware of that with my second child. So my first child, super abusive marriage, left him when she was 3 months old, tried to raise her with my family for 6 months. That was a nightmare. 9 months old, gave her up for adoption. Felt like it was the best thing to do. It was still traumatizing. Didn't really have a lot of support after. But when I remarried, everyone was like, well, you'll have a new baby, you'll have a new this, and it's just gonna make everything better. And I'm kind of glad that someone kind of prepared me. I don't know if it was just my gut, but it was bittersweet. Because when that next child reached 9 months, all of a sudden I became painfully aware of what I'd lost, what I'd given up. And unfortunately, at the time, the open adoption, it kind of turned into more of a closed adoption. It wasn't as open as I'd hoped it had been. And so it was really interesting to dance with that second child, because I was so grateful to be with her and have her. But here she's reflecting my first child as well. And that dance could have set me into postpartum depression. But I think some of it was I held space for it and just kind of accepted that grief and that loss coming up, because I didn't want it to take away from enjoying my child as well. But it was such a mix of emotions. It was like having the best and the worst emotions at the same time, which is not really how our brains or emotions are meant to work. So you kind of have to deal with one to get to experience the other. Or, okay, what is this telling me? What is this? Oh, okay, this is grief. What do I want to do with this, so that you can move on? Did you have any particular triggers or anything like that that you worked through? I mean, obviously not the same situation at all, but were there things that really helped you? What were those main things?
Yeah, for me it was, well, 2 things. So I didn't want to take the medication that I was prescribed, because I had taken a lot of antidepressants and sleeping pills throughout my 20s, and the side effects were really not great for me. I'm very sensitive, and sleeping pills, like you too. I would just I would wake up the next day. I would remember I would be driving to work and I'd have the windows down because I still felt really groggy when I would be driving to work. And so here I was breastfeeding my daughter, and I was like, this doesn't make sense to me that you want me to take these sleeping pills, because the sleep deprivation is definitely tied to my mental health. So I hear that. You want me to take these sleeping pills, and I just, like, I'm groggy. Like, I was like, this doesn't make sense. I'm waking up like on the clock to breastfeed her. So I was not down for that. So I did a lot of research, and I fell upon medical cannabis and CBD specifically. And CBD for treating severe depression. And
Mm.
because I used to work in pharma at the time, I knew how to read research papers. So I basically went on PubMed and I did all this research by myself to find out like high doses of therapeutic CBD. And I found articles about how they were using it to treat veterans and their PTSD and mental health and all that. And so I essentially self-treated myself. My therapist was thankfully pro like CBD, so that was helpful. But I would literally just take the prescription from my doctor. I would be like, okay, great. Yep, totally using this. Pretend that I was like filling it out, because if I didn't, then I'm raising flags, right? And like all these things.
Yeah.
And then I was just treating myself with really high doses of CBD. And that honestly, it saved my life. So that was one of the first things. And then the second thing was, once with therapy, at first it was really helpful. And then I would say about 6 months in, I started feeling like it was weighing me down, in the sense that I would go and I was like, okay, this is great. Here's like another way that this is some childhood issues. Okay, awesome. See you same time next week. And I ended up feeling like more heavier. Like I would leave there really like, oh God, like here's more childhood wounding. Like, okay, great. Thank you. I have the awareness, but like, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
And so that's when I turned to trying to look for alternatives, and I ended up discovering energy healing. And that was the absolute game changer for me, because that's where I started doing some subconscious work and really like undoing exactly what you were talking about when you were talking about, when you were born at 9 months, it triggered all these things, right? That's literally what happens in our emotional body and our memory bodies and everything. And so with energy healing, I'm able to actually heal and change that, and change the subconscious brain so that these triggers don't happen anymore. Because that's what happens now, is like when you are a parent, you're living your child's childhood, but you're reliving it through the lens of your own childhood. So it's not just their childhood, it's theirs and their experiences, but that's it through the lens of, as like you were saying, with like, this shouldn't be like this intense of a reaction, right? Like this is disproportionate. And that's probably because there's a subconscious record in the mind that is bringing you back to the same moment when you were 7 or whatever it is. And so for me, energy healing was an absolute godsend. And just in a few sessions, like I changed from being incredibly pessimistic and depressed to just being very like optimistic and kind of like refinding purpose and passion. And so it really was much quicker for me. And it took me out of what I call the awareness overwhelm, when you become really aware of your childhood triggers and your wounds and your trauma. And then, it's just like, okay, I have all this awareness. I don't know what to do with it. And then you realize all the ways in which the patterns are repeating in your own and with your children.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like, it's such a weight. And that's why I really call it, the awareness overwhelm, because it can really feed that like depression state or just that anxiety state, because you're like, I sounded exactly like my mother and I don't want to do that, but I can't help it. And here we are repeating the cycle, and I don't want to repeat the cycle because I know how much I struggle with it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just this like never ending cycle.
And I did talk therapy for years, and now I've started exploring different things, and energy healing, chakras, different things that I wasn't necessarily aware of before, but I've always tried to go natural, because like you, I'm extremely sensitive to pharmaceuticals. They're just always way too strong, or I get all the side effects. So it's just not really an option. So I really have to mind my P's and Q's with what I know does work, and healthy living is definitely a huge part of it. But what essential oils work for me, some herbs that I found that work for me, staying hydrated, moving my body. But then it's personal things too. Like music is a huge key for me, dancing, huge key for me. Certain things with my kids, but I choose those things, but I'm aware of them. But the weight of that awareness is interesting, because sometimes it feels like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, because you're unpeeling an onion and you're going to a deeper and a deeper and a deeper layer. And so for me, I've started some EMDR work, and then I was looking at CBT and BBT, just something more that helps reset the brain. But I'm interested in the energy work as well, because I feel like it's all connected. Our bodies are so much more than just the physical. There's definitely a spiritual side to our beings, or we wouldn't notice there's lighter weight when a body passes on. There's definitely something there. Or when we know life is inside of us, and the feeling we have as mothers, that's so special and so unique to carrying a child. there's definitely an energy change there. If you're
Mhm.
aware of it and that hasn't been, I don't know, schooled out of you, for lack of a better word, because kids definitely have those instincts and that intuition that they want
Mhm.
to honor.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think ancestral healing is just such a big
Mm.
part of it, and that's where energy healing can really be powerful with ancestral healing because it's like our genetics, like your grandmother, like when she was carrying your mother, and then your mom, all of like their eggs, it's like like with for girls, like we're born with all of our eggs right in our ovaries, and so it's like I don't know if you've ever seen those like graphics on social media, and
Yeah,
it's like
I've seen a
your
lot of
and
those
your
lately.
mom's and your grandma, right? Like it's all
Yeah.
there, and it's all passed down, and there's so many things that are passed down that way that we're holding on to such baggage, and I don't think that there's any woman in the world who ever goes into motherhood with like a clean slate. She's going with it with her mom's baggage and her grandmother's baggage and the great grandmother's baggage and so on and so forth, right? And so, yeah, when I was doing ancestral healing, I realized a lot of things about my own mom and some of the things that I had, no idea of the weight that she was carrying, the things that she was going on like in her life and in her
And they weren't
pregnancy.
yours. You're carrying things that
No,
weren't yours. And
exactly.
it's so
Exactly.
nice when you can lift that off and go,
Hmm.
oh, this isn't mine. This is from
Hmm.
something else. When I had Reiki done and they brought up some stuff, it kind of shocked me. And then I asked about some family history and they're like, yeah, you had an ancestor went through this, or you had an ancestor who went through that. And I'm like, okay, because when that came up and they were talking about it, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, but and
Hmm.
it was like just the image of a bear. I guess I have an uncle or someone who was mauled by a grizzly bear or something. And that was in Reiki. And I have another ancestor who used to jump trains and then actually got injured jumping a train.
Mm.
And then there's just things and then there's some abuse and some different things. Just people did the best that they could with what they had at the time. And but knowing that gives me so much more compassion for how
Mhm.
far my family has come. But I
Mhm.
definitely feel like that chain breaker and that responsibility of a lot of these things end with me. And it's a lot.
Mhm.
The only way somebody has to be there to break the chains and break the pattern, because most likely now that you've dealt with postpartum depression, hopefully that means it's not passed on as strong, or you will know how to help your daughter if it does come up. And that's been some of my what's been interesting through some of the things I've experienced is because I've experienced them, I've been able to help the next generation in a way I wouldn't have been able to because I'm willing to go, okay, I went through that. Who do I wish had shown up for me? What would that look like? How can I be that for my child now? Or how can I be that for this family member in my family because I didn't have that? Who did I need? And I'm sure that you are doing that work now, helping other mothers with postpartum. You talk about that work that you do and sharing this new venture and gift that you have.
Yeah, so I'm really deeply passionate about ancestral healing. It's definitely a pillar of what I do because that's it. When I worked with, I mean, healers need healers as well. So I have my own set of healers. And I remember there was one specific moment where my daughter had kind of the main like trauma moment in her lifetime. She's 7 now, but this one moment a couple of years ago. And I remember getting on with my healers and she was like, Annie, she's like, you really have like supported your daughter in doing this and you've already kind of done the healing right now that she hasn't laid down any of this subconscious stuff. She doesn't have what we call like akashic records tied to this, so she's like, you're good, like let it go. Because I was like, oh my god, this is going to change her, like this is like, it was really, I was so overwhelmed by it. Again, that
Yeah.
awareness, overwhelm, right? So yeah, I'm really deeply passionate about ancestral healing now because of that, because it's like you want to give them like a clean slate. So yeah, I do energy healing and astrology for parenting now because I'm very passionate about family karma, and a birth chart is like that map of family karma, and it's also children's manuals. And so I really combine astrology and energy healing together so that I can support moms to liberate their family lines, and so that we're not passing on this generational trauma and we decide that it ends with us, and then we can actually make a difference for that in all of the energetics of it and the ancestral karma and the akashics and all of that subconscious stuff. So yeah, that's kind of how I support moms now.
Well, I love how your story fits resilient strength because it really takes strength to be in a situation like that, ask for help and to get better, and to be willing to find what's going to work for you and not settle and know that you can find the answer for what you need somewhere out there in the world, whether that's research or another person, another healer. And then you've created that community. Now you're giving it to other women. I love when things are full circle like that, when you make your mess your message or when you take your struggle and then it has purpose and it has meaning and we're able to make something that was not great into a blessing for other people.
Mm-hmm.
How would you define resilience?
Yeah.
And where would you measure your strength now? And what do you think about the word strength when it comes to motherhood?
Mm-hmm. So for me, resilience is, your ability to not ever give up and the ability to kind of bounce back, and not so much this I had to like undo. I thought that I was going to heal and that I would never have hardships anymore. I thought that was like the ultimate attainment of healing, right? But no, it's the fact that you can like shorten the time that it takes to, get back. So that for me is the measure of resilience. When a hardship happens, it doesn't throw me off into a spiral for weeks on end, and now it can be as short as hours. So that's really been a big shift for me, and I think that's how I can, measure resilience. Yeah, we're not trying to obtain that it never happens anymore. We're trying to shorten the fact that it does. And yeah, the strength is really, I think, not giving up and not falling into victim mentality. And I mean, I trust me, like I've been there. I was very much in my victim mentality. So the strength to, not have it, and to realize that, we really have the power to heal ourselves and to make change and to be the cycle breaker, right? I think that's where really strength comes, is when we choose to break the cycles and be the one that says, it ends with me. That's where strength in motherhood comes.
Yeah. And I think motherhood for me has definitely helped me to grow in strength in ways I never even knew I needed to, because it shows you your weakness. I think it shows you where you have room to work and to grow, to be the mother that you want to be, but also be the person that you want to be. I think we have these ideas when we're young of what motherhood is going to be, and often it looks completely different, or there's a variation in it we didn't count on. But it's there to help us grow and to help us be strong for our kids, and to help them be the next resilient, strong generation. And that's what we get to do. We get to make the next step better, and to admit our mistakes, to admit our weaknesses, and do something about it, because we care, because we're aware, and because we're willing to do that work, whether it's inner work or asking for help or whatever it may be. And if anyone wants to work with you, where can they find you, Annie?
So they can find me on my website. It's anniebertrand.com. All of the information is there, and different offers that I can support moms in.
Wonderful. Well, audience, thank you for being here for this important conversation on postpartum depression, resilience, and strength. I believe in you, believe in yourself. God bless. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Resilient Mother Podcast. Thank you for joining us today. Please don't forget to subscribe so we can share this message. We are a worldwide podcast with guests all around the world, and we want to continue to grow this community. You can find us on socials. You could also be a guest. Look for that link below if you'd be interested in being a guest on the podcast. If you know a sponsor or would like to be a sponsor, please reach out to me or Catherine as well.
Sure. We want you all on this journey. We want to hear your stories. We want to share your stories. We want to gain strength from each other, because together we're stronger. And to never forget the blessing of being a mother and what we're creating. We're creating the future every single day of our lives. So get on this train with us and let's do this thing, moms.
I believe in you. Believe in yourself. God bless.